We said yesterday that Valtteri would have to be 100% on it to out-qualify George Russell, and that's what happened today. He was really good out of the box in free practice today, and then in qualifying it was Valtteri kind of in charge, but it was always within a tenth or less than a tenth all the time. Superb performance by George Russell. We'll get on to him in a second. But for Valtteri Bottas, this was a real test, because the one thing he didn't need for his ego, for his position in the team, for his stature with Lewis Hamilton, was to get out-qualified by George Russell in Sakhir. And he pulled it off. It was a great qualifying performance by Valtteri, a sort of Lewis Hamilton type performance. Today he looked sublime in the car. There were none of those edgy moments, no risky moments, none of that running wide on the curb, no lockups that we saw. Just looked great in the racing car. Very confident and right on top of his game. So congratulations to Valtteri. The margin in the end to George Russell was 0.026. That's 26 hundredths of a second. For George Russell to jump into the car and to be out-qualified by Valtteri by that tiniest of margins, to qualify on the front row for another Mercedes lockout, just a superb performance from George. He cannot be disappointed by that, and I don't think any of his fans will be disappointed either. A really, really good lap. It was interesting to hear George say at one point that he couldn't get the rotation right into turn one, and he's talking there, of course, to reference to Valtteri's rotation at turn one and the good job Valtteri was doing. And Valtteri is that good. We've seen it in the past. This was his 16th pole. He's really, really quick. And there's another thing here, and it comes down to teammates. When you've got teammates like Lewis and Valtteri, and one of them has a problem at some point, it immediately lifts the game of the other. Inextricably, completely without any explanation, the other driver assumes some sort of role and confidence. Maybe it's to do with, well, he's out of the way for this weekend. You see it at Monaco when it's two very close teammates and one of them has a shunt. You know it's going to destabilize him for the rest of the weekend. It immediately lifts the game of the other driver. And I think that's what we saw with Valtteri today. There was no Lewis there. Okay, there was George Russell, but Valtteri didn't really have to think about him. All he had to think about was just working with the engineers, doing all the things that he does regularly. And almost subconsciously, he became a different driver. Same people in the team, but all of a sudden, everything was working harmoniously for Valtteri. And I think that's what we saw today. We saw the combination of a lot of difficult days and perhaps even difficult races for Valtteri, all suddenly relaxing. And this driver, without Lewis there on the other side of the garage, just benefiting from everything that is great about Mercedes. And guess what? There was a great strategy call as well by Mercedes, the team we love to knock for not being quick on their feet. This circuit is all about traffic, as we said yesterday, and it's pretty scary, as we said yesterday. But great thinking by Mercedes. We can get through Q2 on a set of medium tyres. We think, we hope, let's do it. And then if we can do that, we'll use an extra set of the soft tyres that we didn't use in Q2 to do 3 runs in Q3. And within the 3, we should be able to get a couple of traffic-free laps. And indeed, Valtteri's pole lap was in that middle phase when the track was relatively quiet. George didn't do his time then. He did it right at the end. He had to go slightly quicker to try to get ahead of Max Verstappen. He did. Max went quicker too, but George just had Max. That was the quality of George's drive, and it was all down to hundredths of a second. I mean, let's just talk about some of the gaps now during qualifying. In Q1, 4 drivers did 54.3. 2 of them, Daniel Ricciardo and Daniel Kvyat, all went through into Q3. That's how competitive it was. And that was for sort of 9th, 10th, 11th. In Q2, 7 drivers did 53.8. Let's list them. Valtteri Bottas, who was on mediums at the time, got to say. Carlos Sainz, George Russell, also on medium. Everybody else on soft. Charles Leclerc, Lance Stroll, Daniel Kvyat, Daniel Ricciardo, all did 53.8 in Q3. And this is all because the lap is so short, as we were saying yesterday. That brings with it, obviously, a compressed grid, but at the same time, massive issues with traffic. And that's why Mercedes went for that 3 set of tyre strategy in Q3. And it worked for them, because there's nothing more disconcerting than being on a good lap and then suddenly seeing a car 200, 180 meters ahead of you. You're catching it quickly. Exactly where are you going to pass it? And does he know you're there anyway? These thoughts inevitably go through the minds of any racing driver. And to have a clear track is worth a lot of time around the Sakhir outer circuit, as they love to call it. So it's the two Mercedes on the pole, Valtteri Bottas with George Russell alongside him, Max Verstappen P3. He eventually had to go out on a set of softs to do a time in Q2. He was on mediums, the strategy was right, Renault went out on mediums, Ferrari went out on mediums, but for the second phase of Q2, everybody dissolved back to soft tyres except the two Mercedes runners. So Max said his time on the soft tyre, so he'll be starting on the soft, the two Mercedes on the medium. And that'll be interesting because it looks as if Red Bull can get quite a lot of longevity out of the tyre. There's less degradation with the tyre this weekend compared with last for the reasons we explained in the preview video. And P4, and you can put this down maybe as the single best qualifying lap driven by any driver anywhere. No, let's not do that because it isn't the world's most demanding racetrack, but it was a great lap nonetheless. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. We said yesterday that when he stopped, the lap on which he stopped, he was actually purple in sector 1. And I said then we didn't really know where that was going to go, if it was real, if it was a really great sign for Ferrari. But Ferrari were pretty good in the untimed session today. And then in qualifying, Charles Leclerc just got stronger and stronger and stronger. Sebastian Vettel kept pace for a while, but then all of a sudden, when it really came down to the sharp end, Leclerc was just superb. I say superb, it was one of those laps where it wasn't a Bottas-like lap where you're just sitting there and everything's happening at the right time, almost in slow motion, no errors anywhere, just really clean exits after really, really good braking areas. Charles Leclerc's lap was absolutely on the edge, sparks everywhere, right on the edge of what you can do with a racing car anywhere, albeit on this small Mickey Mousey lap. So it was just one of those laps, and at the end of it, Charles just got out of the car. Well, why wouldn't you? Can you do anything more than that? Can you do anything better than that? So Ferrari line up P4 alongside Max Verstappen for the Sakhir Grand Prix. Great news for all the Ferrari fans out there. Great news, of course, for Formula One in general. Sebastian Vettel was P13th. He didn't make it through to Q3. He did a 54.1 in Q2 on the soft tyre. Charles Leclerc a 53.8. Now that's 0.3 of a second. Not a lot, you would have said, but that 53.8 made Charles P6 and Sebastian P13. I think that is the difference between those two right now. It's a couple of tenths, but sometimes a couple of tenths can be a massive amount of time. Sergio Perez P5 for Racing Point on 53.7, and I think we have to accept fairly comprehensively that that is the limit of that particular car driver combination, because 53.7 is what Sergio did in Q2 when he suddenly went to the top of the list. He didn't actually finish Q2 P1. Max did a 53.6 on soft tyres, but he did a 53.7 then. And then in Q3, he did 53.7 again, twice over. So that is it, 53.7, a pretty good lap time, pretty good starting position for Racing Point. And I reiterate what I was saying yesterday. Sergio Perez looking like he's in the mode for another really good result, not making a lot of mistakes. The team looked to be kind of on top of what they're doing strategy-wise. Lance Stroll, P10, made it through into Q3, you can say, but never really looked quite as convincing as Perez in the car. And again, gotta say, I really hope that Sergio Perez finds a drive in 2021. He's never driven better, and it would be such a shame, not only for him, for Mexico, but obviously for Formula One as well, if he didn't make it. And, the only seat available now is the other Red Bull. And what happened to the driver of the other Red Bull? Ah, yes, Alex Albon. Alex Albon, if you please, didn't make it through to Q3 in a car that Max Verstappen used to qualify P3. Alex did a 54.0 on softs, and the same session, Max a 53.6. Around that circuit, in that car, that is a big gap. So Alex Albon not looking good. The only thing you can say, there's other quick drivers around him at that end of Q2, including Esteban Ocon, who looked really good yesterday, but didn't get through into Q3. He did a 53.9, just ahead of Alex, and of course Sebastian Vettel right behind him. Pierre Gasly just scraped through to Q3. He'll be starting 9th. But going back into the results, Daniel Kvyat, really good performance from Daniel. As I say, Q2, he was right on the edge. 53.8. That 53.8 could have been a 53.9. He could have been P10 in Q2. He could have just failed to get through to Q3. But then he did a really good job on the soft tyre, 53.9. So he starts 6th, ahead of Daniel Ricciardo, who just got better and better in typical Daniel Ricciardo fashion. No histrionics yesterday, but really good today. 53.9 for Daniel. Same time as the two Daniels, 53.9. What can I say? 6th and 7th. Carlos Sainz, 8th, 54.0. Really good job by Carlos. There was a bit of talk on the radio at the end. They didn't get the strategy quite right, but Carlos said, no, I think we got everything out of the car. Whereas Lando Norris didn't make it through to Q3 and said something along the radio along the lines of my bad, which I gather is social speak for I think I made a mistake. But it was to do with strategy and getting him out a little bit too early when the track wasn't really quick. And there were some toes going on there as well. And at one point we had Carlos Sainz saying, I'd like to thank George because I think he gave me a toe, I gave him a toe, and isn't it nice that we're all mates? So yeah, some toes were going on. Well, as for the rookies, the two Haas's didn't make it through into Q2. No surprise there, I guess. Kevin Magnussen, 54.7. Pietro Fittipaldi, 55.4. Bit of a gap there. It is the Ferrari engine, so that car, not easy to drive. Obviously, they're taking wing out of it. So not a bad performance from Pietro. Nicholas Latifi, 54.7. Neither Williams got through either. Nicholas Latifi, 54.7. Jack Aitken, 54.8. Good job, Jack Aitken. Very nice job. Williams will be very pleased with that. I guess George Russell would have done something like a 54.3 or 54.4 and would have got through into Q2 in a Williams. But nonetheless, for Jack Aitken, again, just to jump into the car and do that under pressure, good job. So there we are. It will inevitably be a really competitive race tomorrow. Valtteri Bottas, great job to get the pole. George Russell, excellent performance to back him up. Front row of the grid for Mercedes, jumping in for Lewis Hamilton. Max Verstappen right there, starting on the soft tyre. And next to him, Charles Leclerc. And not only was Charles really good on the soft tyre, but on the medium tyre, at the first phase of Q2, he did the same time as Max Verstappen. So it could be that even though Ferrari got a big power disadvantage and had to take up a lot of wing, it could be that with a driver like Leclerc and his tyre management skills, that they could be in for a good result tomorrow. We'll see, and we'll see you then.